In this movie, I'll show you how to introduce a spot color into your artwork, and I'll explain why you might want to do so. So here's the idea. When you're sending a job out to be commercially reproduced, you're almost always printing it using the four process color inks, which are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And they mix to form this wide range of printable colors. However, there's an awful lot of colors that you can't print as well, including very bright greens and rich, vivid purples and bright scarlet reds and so forth. And so the most common way to address that problem is to introduce another ink in the form of a spot color. Now, what you need to bear in mind about spot colors is they cost money. You don't have to buy them from Illustrator or from Adobe. You have to pay your printer in order to use a fifth or sixth ink, because paper and ink is what drives printer costs. Now, another reason to use a spot color is to nail down a color. For example, let's say that you've got a corporate client who always uses a very specific color for its logo. In that case, you would want to make sure to use a spot color to print that logo as opposed to trying to mix the color using CMYK. So let's say in our case, I want to brighten up these purples that are associated with the robots on the second, third, and fourth artboards. I'm going to go ahead and press Shift Page Up in order to switch to the third artboard and zoom on in as well. Now these purples to me are looking like grayish blues. So fortunately, I've gone ahead and linked all the purples to this global swatch, which is called Mild Violet. So I'll go ahead and double click on this swatch in order to bring up the swatch options dialog box. Notice that the color mode is set to CMYK, as it generally is when we're working inside of a print document. I'm going to turn on the preview checkbox so I can see what I'm doing, and I'll take the K value down to 0, because that's going to help to brighten up those colors. And then I'll take the yellow value, yellow being a color complement to purple. I'll go ahead and take it down to 0 as well, and that's going to give us a stronger color as well. It's a little bit too blue for me, so I'll crank that magenta value all the way up to 100%. And we end up not only changing all the purples inside of our document because they're linked to this global swatch, but I also end up brightening the purples considerably. So I'll go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. But let's say that's not enough for me. I want a more vivid purple still. So I talked my client into paying for a fifth ink, and now it's a matter of introducing that spot color into my artwork. To get to the spot color libraries, you go down to the lower left corner of the swatches panel and click on this little books icon. And then you want to choose this command right there, Color Books. Now, not all of these libraries include spot colors. Many of them include CMYK mixes. For spot colors, you want one of the industry standards. And in the States, that typically means Pantone. So I'm going to go ahead and select Pantone plus solid coated, because most likely you're going to be printing to solid coated stock. And that brings up this independent panel that contains more than 1,000 different colors, as you can see right here. And you can select any of them if you want to. So to introduce one of these colors into your swatches panel that's saved along with this specific illustration, all you have to do is click on it. So for example, I might look at these colors and think, Pantone 185C looks good. I'll go ahead and click on it. And that adds that color to the swatches panel. Now notice this little dot that appears inside of the white triangle. The white triangle indicates a global color swatch, like the mild violet one that we just got done modifying. This little dot indicates that we're working with a spot color that's going to print to a separate plate. Now, the more common approach is that you're sitting down with a Pantone swatch book, and you're looking through the book to find the exact color that you want to work with. And that color will typically include a number. Then you click inside the Find field, and you dial in that number. In my case, it's 266. And that's going to go ahead and select that color automatically from the list. In my case, down here in the lower right corner. Then you just go ahead and click on it to add it to the swatches panel. All right, now I'll go ahead and close the Pantone panel. Now, if I were creating my artwork, then I would just go ahead and assign my Pantone spot color on the fly. But I've already got this artwork created here that's associated with this mild violet global swatch. So I need to replace the colors associated with mild violet. And you do that, by the way, by clicking on the color that you want to use as a replacement. Let's say, just for the sake of demonstration here, I want to use Pantone 185. And then you Alt-drag or Option-drag that swatch onto the global swatch. And you can see I've got this little fist with a plus sign that's showing me I'm going to replace the colors associated with mild violet. It'll still be called mild violet, as you can see here, but it becomes the spot color, hence the little dot, and we're replacing the colors inside of the artwork. course, I don't want to use that red. I want to use the purple instead. So I'll click on it, Pantone 266, and then I'll Alt drag or Option drag it onto mild violet. All right, the next thing we need to do is subscribe to the proper naming conventions. Because if I stick with mild violet, then my printer is going to output an independent separation that actually says mild violet on it. And they're not going to know what in the world mild violet is. They don't have an ink sitting around that they can mix called mild violet, where they do have the ingredients to mix Pantone 266C. So you need to get that name exactly right. I'm going to double click on that Pantone swatch so we can see something here. Notice instead of having color mode set to CMYK, as it usually is when making a swatch, it's set to book color, which isn't even normally available, as you're about to see. Meanwhile, all these options toward the top of the dialog box are dimmed, so we can't modify them. And the actual color, the screen color that is, not the color of the ink, but the color that we see on screen, is mixed in the lab mode. The L in lab stands for luminance, that is, darkness or brightness, while A and B are two perpendicular color axes. So A starts at green and becomes magenta, and then B starts blue and becomes yellow. Now, it's not really necessary that you understand exactly how lab works, but the idea is this is a device-independent color model. So it has nothing to do with your printer. It has nothing to do with your screen. It's designed to emulate the colors that you see in the real world. All right, I'm going to cancel out of there. But you do need to remember this. Pantone in all caps, space, 266, space, C. Or whatever it says up there. You have to write that down or memorize it. Then cancel out. Now go ahead and get rid of these two Pantone swatches. We don't need them anymore, and they're going to confuse things if we keep them. So I'll click on one, shift-click on the other, and press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and click on the trash can icon in order to get rid of them. Now, double-click on the mild violet swatch in order to bring up the swatch options panel. I'll press the caps lock key and dial in Pantone 266C, like so, just one C. And the color type should be spot color. The color mode is lab, as you can see here, and these are the same values we saw just a moment ago. But I want you to notice, we do not have the option of selecting book color. So just leave it set to lab. Don't change that. It's not going to change how the ink outputs because the ink is the ink. It's just going to change how things look on screen if you go modifying these values. All right, now I'll click OK in order to accept the change to the swatch name. And now notice if I were to double click on the swatch once again, that Illustrator automatically recognizes it as being a book color because I entered the right name. That's all there is to it. And it went ahead and dimmed these options toward the top of the dialog box as well, which is exactly what we want. All right, I'll go ahead and cancel out of there. So just to give you a sense of what we've managed to achieve here, I'll switch over to a previous version of my illustration. And you can see before we had these very dim by comparison purples. Now we have much more vivid colors to work with, thanks to our introduction of an independent ink in the form of a Pantone spot color here inside Illustrator.